Hi there, tech people. I'm Sean Worker, your host, and it's great to have you on another extended podcast of the Adapters TechX, where we explore the business trends and fads that are in the service industry. Equally, we like to explore those and have those conversations with the brightest and best people in the space. And today, we are certainly going to explore that with Bob Hecht and Biju Chudasama. Big shout out to our powerhouse, which is Hunter Gatherer, that makes this show happen behind the scenes. And of course, our relationship with No Vacancy, Glenn Hausman, who is the leading influencer in travel and hospitality themes with his No Vacancy podcast in the United States, where we both cover the United States, the Americas, Europe, and the Middle East. So today we have Bob Hecht joining us, who's a former partner with Alex Partners, with the technology and restructuring practice. He's an advisor to numerous companies and is known as a transformist and hangs out in the south of France, where I know that there's great wine because I've been there. Equally, Biju Chudasama, who is the CTO of Wilson James, and Wilson James provides security, construction, logistics, as well as to the aviation services industry, as well as the technology space. Wilson James has, over the last 30 years, built up a heck of a company with over 30 years and 6,000 employees across the public and private sector, largely in the United Kingdom. Biju has a reputation as being a multi-category specialist in the tech world, having influenced such brands as Chubb and Aviva before moving on to the CTO role at Wilson James. He's active in the Turning Lives Around charity, and we'll speak more about that in a few moments, and is a guy who gets stuff done. He's got GSD and the T-shirt to prove it. And Bob, we're going to kick off with what the hell is a transformist?
Well, Sean, first of all, it's good to be here. Biju, good to see you again, as always. And thanks for the opportunity. What's a transformist? Well, that's a difficult question. I'm still trying to find the answer to, but that's what I am, I guess. People call me that, have for years. Basically,
it's going to be that sort of show, Bob, isn't it?
I know. Basically, I'm a disruptor. And having cut my teeth in the restructuring world through my time at Alex Partners, I've learned that the status quo and doing things the way we've always done them doesn't always work. And, the origins of this thing went back to a seminar that I attended years ago when I had hair. There was a speaker who had written a book, and the keynote of his delivery was, "If it ain't broke, break it." And I kind of was taken aback by that, and then I absorbed it, and then it's been sinking into my my little pea brain ever since. And the result of that was the formation of a principle that I've adopted and use regularly, and it's a 3P principle. And the 3 Ps are patience, persistence, and perspective. As you're working with organizations and individuals around how to transform themselves from virtually any space that they happen to find themselves in to a space that moves forward. And so that's what I do. I transform. Or I help people transform. Let's put it that way.
It's interesting when you just walk away from that and you kind of go, we should question when everything's going fine. Maybe that's the time to check it out. Maybe not break it, maybe break it. Who knows? Yeah. Great perspective. When you look, Biju, who do you look at? What companies do you look at to keep Wilson James ahead of the competition?
I think the challenge is, I was thinking about this a few weeks back, and what I tend to look for is who are those organizations that are consumer facing, because they have to evolve, they have to innovate almost on a daily basis, because we as humans, our habits change. We want to do something different. We want life easier, and what would we have done in the days before the smartphone and the ability to do anything from anywhere possible? So again, Sean, I know it's a tough question in terms of who you're out there, who is out there that we look at. But if I look at, I mentioned a few of those. Look at what Apple have done in just transforming how we as individuals, as humans, become more mobile and become Samsung are doing the same thing. If I look at Amazon, we've mentioned that. All these organizations are just hooking onto how do you make the whole process of what you want, whether it's procuring, whether it's just information gathering, but how do you make that as simple as possible? And I think from my perspective, how do I grab some of that and bring that back into the organization that that I'm in right now with Wilson James and see how do we make life easier for the 6,000 individuals that day in and day out go out and work at our client locations, and how do we make something I use quite frequently internally within the team is how do we make the work that our people do easy? And I think that's the objective that I have, and we and the constant thirst and learning of what else is out there that just helps us keep on making what our people do.
This is the first time that we've actually had a board member be on the show as well with the business that we were chatting about. How does the board how does a board inspire change as well as balance that with governance and fiduciary responsibility?
It's a collaborative effort, as any board organization is, that values the intelligence and the experience of each and every member individually. That then forms a meaningful collaboration that leads to meaningful change and to follow your book, to adaptation, to adapting the change that's happening. And we're living in a world, as everybody knows right now, that is changing so rapidly that it's almost impossible to keep up. But with a collaborative effort, keeping up becomes a lot easier. And so when I look around the table at the board members at Wilson James, I see a very experienced, number one, talented and visionary group of people who are willing to adapt. And that's a key. And I think it's a critical element of the success of the company and the continued growth of the company. And it really portends well for the future of the company as well. As a board member, number one, I feel privileged to sit on that board. But number two, I get excited at every meeting I join because there are good things that happen. And that's largely because of the influence of people like Biju, who come to us with well-conceived, well-constructed ideas. And Biju, you talk about making it easy. And the thought that comes to mind every time I think of somebody who makes something look easy, these are professionals. These are people who have taken the time to learn, who have taken the time, most importantly, to listen to what's going on around them, and then to learn to perform their task in a professional manner. And professionals always make what they do look easy to anyone watching from the outside. No matter how complex it may be, no matter how they have to draw on their own sense of discipline, they do make it look easy. And in the end, it is easier for them because they have that support behind them.
Thanks, Bob. And so, Biju, you've obviously got the support of the board, and fascinated, I think, for our audience is as people learn, and we're on this perpetual journey of micro learning, is what are the traits and what are the features, if you will, of a successful CTO, and how do you become a CTO? What makes you effective so that a board likes you and actually appreciates your input and actually funds your plans? How do you get to that?
Loaded question there, Sean.
Well, Bob is here, so let's pretend he's not.
I wouldn't have said that, had you told me, 10 years ago, what's your ambition? Would you want to become whatever that role would be, whether that's CIO, CTO? How do I ensure the technology that and the platform that we provide, that I provide, my team provides for the organization I work in, is as innovative as possible, that's making that job done. Back then the vocabulary of making it easy wasn't, didn't exist, but it was always the thirst of there's got to be something out there that makes things simpler. And my background, Sean, Bob knows this. So Sean, my background is software development. I started in coding second generation languages. It's probably embarrassing to say this, but I cut my teeth in software development in COBOL. But I think, Sean, I go back to, because of coming through the ranks through software development, analysis, and then project management for a while, and then the last 20 years or so has been as IT director, CIO, CTO. I think I have the strength in depth to understand. Okay, so when you look at a technology piece, I'm not just looking at it from what is being sold to me as a product. I'm looking at it in regards to, well, how does that really help me mold it in a way that will work for this organization? And I suppose that's the one thing that I would urge anyone out there listening to this is, what you get presented isn't how you potentially want to deploy it. You really understand how it really adds value to what you're trying to do.
So when you're thinking about traits and tips moving forward, what are the mistakes that you think CTOs make that could be avoided?
Talking tech.
Talking tech, talking personality, take that any way you want.
I think, and I go back and Bob, one of the things that having learned it the hard way, in terms of when you are at board, when you are talking to the board for funding, it's not about the technology. Again, back to input spec. What you don't want to say is, well, I want really want to invest in this piece of technology because it would do, it allows us to do this, etc. It's really focusing on the investment, yes, but what does that investment buy in terms of outcomes? Does it drive revenue? Does it protect the value of the organization? And does it, I don't know, does it increase gross margin? I always think of, and one thing that I talk to my teams about, I talk to my boards about, is that technology should be the differentiator in gross margin. At the moment we have a cost base, and how do you increase that the gap that exists between what's profit and driving technology innovation?
Right.
And I think that's where I look at it, is what technology brings in is increasing the gap in that respect.
If I can interject a second, Sean, I'll have to say Biju is one of the best I've encountered at being able to break the language barrier, because when he presents to the board, it's in a language that the board members themselves can understand. And, not every member of the board is a tech savvy aficionado of technology. They're looking for results. They're looking for change. They're looking for positive impact on margin and bottom line. And Biju has the ability to translate the technology, the complexity of technology, into language that resonates with the members of the board. And we're very fortunate to have the two founders of the company still active in the company, and Gary Sullivan as chairman and Mark Dobson as the CEO of the company, who are, number one, are good listeners, number two, are inspirational to the organization. And Biju has made it one of his objectives, I think it's fair to say this, Bij, in being able to speak coherently with the Gary Sullivans and Mark Dobsons of the world, in addition to the rest of the senior staff. And, my compliments to you, Bij, for being able to do that. And it just pays off. I mean, what you talked about earlier with the selection of the HR piece and the incredible impact that has had on both the cost model and the operational model for the company. It's been really good.
Yeah, well done to you. I mean, look, we've all run into the buzzsaw where technology is now paramount and center to an organization as opposed to peripheral. It's core. And it is not uncommon, as we found, where CTOs tech themselves out to death at a board and forget that the language is there to get funding and to have a purpose and an outcome, that you've highlighted in some of your case studies already on our show. And I just scratch my head as a former CEO, and then ultimately pitching for funding. It's not just for tech, it's for everything else, and how to make it relevant to the outcome. So, some great advice there for our listeners. So if we can pivot a little bit, can we talk about your tech stack? I've got it right over here on another screen. So can you tell us a little bit about what you inherited, and then how did you create the tech stack that you have today? I mean, obviously you've got a lot of Google Points, contacts, the usual stuff that most tech stacks would have. Where's the variations that you added?
So again, Sean, what we have is, we've got an ERP that in SAP. So we've got an ERP stack there. We've got
Did you inherited that, or did you bring that in?
No, that was inherited. That was implemented 10 plus years back.
Right.
But the change that I, and again from my perspective, my team's perspective, and talking to the board around where we were going on our journey was, and Sean, I mentioned it earlier in the short version of this, is how do we accelerate bringing talent on? How do we put those guys and girls into the shift patterns to serve our clients? And then ultimately, if they've done all that, how do we pay them? And how do you make sure that from a people perspective, we look after them? So the guys who really want to progress and make it a career within Wilson James, how do we ensure we've got the technology to help managers manage their people? So when I look at that, SAP did an element of it, but what else can we do? We mentioned around how do we make recruitment easier, and that was deployed to us back in the last year. Have we mentioned that already? From signing of contract to where it is now, in terms of 7 weeks, the improvement it's made for us from an attracting resources perspective. The next phase is how do we? So again, sorry, just switching over from looking at collaboration and what teams. If I look at Microsoft, we're predominantly a Microsoft house. So look at what the stack we have there really helped us pivot very quickly come March 2020, when we had to get everyone enabled working from home. Even departments that had never worked from home for the single day within the 28 years that they'd been going. If you look at our finance department, some of the HR, these guys, we had to get them equipment. We had to get them used to the element of working from home. And how do we adapt to that? So as we start to piece things out and look for the right platforms, how do you make sure identity is maintained all the way through it? So the user, and this is a constant challenge. How do we make sure from a user perspective, the experience they have is, I've logged in once, or whether that's password, whether that's MFA, or whether that's passwordless. We're looking at all of those opportunities in terms of how do we make identity management and the ability for someone to log in once and be able to be served the multitude of applications they need in order to do their job. I think going forward, my challenge and the team's challenge is how do we simplify that estate? How do we get, we mentioned it before, how do we get SaaS? My objective is, it is cloud first, it is SaaS. We recently migrated from an on-prem data center solution to private cloud, and private cloud was the right thing for us. We weren't ready for public, purely because of the challenges that brought in. But I'm aware that private cloud solution has a limit. It's a personal limit I've set, is that in 3 to 4 years, that private cloud will not exist, because most of my stack will exist within SaaS. And then the challenge will be, and it's a welcome challenge, is how do we integrate all of that? So our key individuals, or the 6,000 plus individuals who are out there, how do we ensure that we can effectively communicate with them? How can they communicate back to us and give us feedback so that we continually add value to the tech stack that we have?
So is it reasonable to say, and I'm probably characterizing this the wrong way, your employees, are they direct employees, or, clarifying question, are they direct employees, or are they subcontractors?
Direct.
Yeah. So, so they're deployed into airports, and they, I believe, offer services, for bringing passengers to flights. They may be in a cart or in a wheelchair or transfers. Is that about right? As an
Yeah,
I
example.
think, Biju, if I could interrupt you for just 1 second, and this talking about the tech stack. Now, here's something that's really exciting that Biju has been working on and is now going into place. And Biju, could you talk a little bit about Abhi's program and what you're doing to really enhance the customer experience at airports like Gatwick, Heathrow, etc.
sure,
That's,
sure.
that's
Can I just
that's
clarify where I was going with that? And Bob, your point is bang on as a case study, and we'll just hit that in a minute. Is just for the sake of clarity. So you have to communicate with multiple employees in different businesses with different structures and security every day. Is that right?
Absolutely, Sean.
So it could be at a construction site, it could be at the airport, it could be where else?
No, so let me give you an example. So construction, we're supporting the build of 8 Bishopsgate, which is a 55-story building going up in London at the moment. That'll be finished by December. So we've got operatives there who are providing material services and construction logistics services.
And what does that mean? Construction logistics? Are they building this stuff, or what are they doing?
So we're helping provide the material for the building. So what we have is, Sean, a consolidation center just outside of Silvertown by the city airport. And so what a lot of builders will do, material will come to us where we consolidate it.
I
And
see.
then they use our technology. We've got a technology developed in-house, Fulcrum, since 2014. And that tech stack is now evolving where individuals working on projects can call off that material literally during the day and identify which gate they want that delivered into because of the shape and the size.
It's amazing. And then you got the other extreme is you've got somebody who's trying to get from curbside to aircraft seat with a completely different path. So going back to Bob's observation, tell us a little bit then about what you've innovated. And, Bob, if you'd like to reframe that, please do.
Sure. And so I think if I go, and Bob, you can chip in if you think I've missed anything. But Sean, right at the early onset of my time with Wilson James, one of the services that we offer is where passengers need help in whether that's with a wheelchair because of mobility or because of sensory issues, where we help them get through security and then vice versa when they come back to their loved ones on landside. One of the things that we've always seen is how do we make that experience for our clients, passengers, easier? How do we make it, the one thing that we've always said is that the stress and the tension and the anxiety of an individual who's got a challenge doesn't start when they reach the airport. It actually starts on the sofa as they're booking that holiday, because immediately they've put it in their mindset that they're different, that their needs are much their needs are difficult. How will they get themselves into the airport, through the airport, and on that flight? So anxiety starts there weeks in advance. One of the things we've looked at doing is then how do we invest in technology that allows us to simplify that journey for that individual? How do we make sure that that individual is able to communicate effectively with the service provider? In this case, it's us. That they're turning up to the airport on this day, and we've seen as Bob mentioned, we've seen something go from idea stage, Sean, which was kind of back end or middle of 2021, to deploying a more operational solution in one of our smaller airports at Luton, and that went live in March. The idea being is that will now be built upon and ready for when we come to conversations with the other airports and much larger airports that we talk to around how they could adopt the same technology. So the idea there is that we've not stood still. If I go back in 2018, Wilson James did not have any operations in any airport from a how do we help passengers to now, 4 years down the line, we're the major provider across the UK. And one of the things we're now adding to is, well, let's now add technology that allows both our clients, so our customers of our clients, to make that seamless, but also from a client's perspective, driving efficiency in how we operate within the airports, to a point where one of the things, Sean, we're looking to do, if you look at technology, is how does IoT, how does sensors, beacons, and autonomous vehicles now start coming in. So they're all trials that we've been thinking about, we've done in small spaces, but how do we just continue innovate to make sure that we help drive both the passenger journey, but also the airport efficiency journey?
It's truly incredible. It really is, and it's been fun to watch that develop as it developed, and I'm looking forward to watching it as it continues to develop and expand itself across the spectrum.
This is such a great example of it, when you transfer that into other spaces. In listening to you both, probably for the last, I don't know, 4 hours. How long have we been at this now? There's a huge sense of empathy about the user, both the employee and the actual customer, the user. And then as you speak about the other direct users, even though they're in a different chain, the going from a different service at curbside to airside, and then interacting with a different company, an airline, but you're interacting with all these different companies. So this continuous loop of varied interaction is something that I think a lot of other services business could put front and center. So in addition to collaboration, I'd say there's a huge sense of user empathy to solve micro problems. And then on top of that, the look at how can we make this even better with IoT, with integrated interfaces, time notching, and having that done in real time. So, and equally, it's bound to help your turnover if it's easy for that individual to go from A to B through security and ultimately get their customer into that seat without grief is a good way to say, this is too complicated, I'm moving on to somewhere else.
Well,
Sean,
you and I have talked a number of times about the death of customer service. And I think one of the things that Wilson James does very, very well, and it's, empathy is a cornerstone principle of the company. And customer service is foremost in the minds of the majority of people who, both at management level and right on through the employee group, are very, very, very aware of the need for and the value of customer service. And but we just don't see enough of that in the world today, and it's refreshing to see it at Wilson James.
Well said, and I hope others will think about that. The other part is, I think, as we go through this, and one of the things that's really a front and center for us at Adapters TechX is user experience, and the amount of times that you go on somebody's either website or their pathway to purchase or their pathway post-purchase seems somehow to forget that the person buying is the person keeping the business alive. But equally having the same perspective with employees today and each other and the customer. So, things have got a little bit more complicated, but empathy is such a key point in emotional intelligence as to what the user is thinking, be it an employee or yourself or a leader or a board or director member, is pivotal to driving the business forward and being sustainable. So really cool stuff. If I might pivot now that we're thinking about empathy, you're involved in a really cool charity. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Biju?
Yeah, sure, Sean. I kind of get really emotional about it whenever I talk about these guys, but I reached out to my network. I'm probably going back a year ago, and said, how do I? My reasons for getting involved was one single thing. When you get to an IT director for an organization the size I'm in now, you normally get the right level of services people will knock on your door from a tier 1 to tier 2 offering their services. When you are an IT manager of a very small organization, maybe a charity, what you don't have is the luxury of having that thinking given to you. So one of the things I reached out about a year back was I'd love to work with any organization that has that similar help, and how do I help them from a charity, again, at no cost. And a good friend of mine who I worked with at Ariva recommended, look, I'm at this charity and we do, we're turning lives around. You fall in love with what they do, which is they're either at the point where someone is about to be made homeless, that is someone or a family, or where they're picking people up who are homeless to be housed somewhere where they can then be provided the help, the support to become self supportive. And the whole idea of the charity, and hence the name Turning Lives Around, is given the opportunity to then say, well, actually, if we can teach you a little bit more about how you manage your finances, teach you a little bit more about welfare, caring for yourself, how do you then go away? We'll give you and then move on to another. The idea being is they get housing, they get supported, and they can get betterment. My role is really, I'm really going to downplay this. Is, as I say, I went in there to look at how can I help the IT manager understand more about the services we can offer. I think there's about 140 employees, but we've taken that, and something I've learned from Bob is look at their processes, and we've remapped over the last 6 months. In the time I've spent with them, is remap all their process to understand where they can drive efficiency. I mean, that's taken me into areas where I'm now supporting the senior leadership team around, whether that's better procurement processes coming in, just becoming more efficient in how they do it. But let me give you 2 or 3 examples. They do some real great work around taking women who work the streets off the streets. So something called Housing First, where they've got accommodation set for 20 individuals who are taken off the streets and given housing, and then being helped to move away from doing what they're doing. 2 classic examples. There's an individual who was the homeless, is now coming. He's in their senior leadership team now. He's about to complete his final year as a junior doctor. So
Wow.
that's inspirational. The other thing is that they've got a mother who has finally, got herself organized and sorted. So she's got her children back. So when you hear, those are just 2 of many fascinating examples. And I go back. Whenever I spend time with them, they're up in Leeds. I'm in the Midlands. So I spend, once every 4 weeks, I go up there, spend some time. But every time I talk about them to others, they all want to be involved in helping progress and move that charity. So yeah, no, just I could talk for hours, Sean, Bob, on these guys.
Well, Turning Lives Around is just doing a bit of research and going on their website and some of the great case studies that are on there, which is a great way to learn, and all the programs that are on there. Always underfunded, and talent can get them there faster. So it's really great. And if you don't mind, we'll certainly add the link for listeners if they'd like to learn a little bit more and maybe support it if they're in the area. That'll be on an easy click through on the distribution, either on Spotify or Apple or YouTube or LinkedIn. So with that, I want to thank both of you for an extended conversation about a lot of topics. Thank you, Biju. Thank you, Bob, for your insights. And certainly I'm walking away with empathy. Put yourself into the user's shoes and make sure that user is a 360 view. Am I about right there, or am I characterizing this the wrong way?
No, you're spot on, Sean.
Right on the money, Sean. Right on the money. That's exactly the story.
Well, thank you. I know this will may be an impact to the community that watches and listens to this. So thank you both. So hang on there. We're just going to wrap up now. And much thanks to you both for your absolute honesty and passion and commitment to looking over the fence and hopefully inspiring others. So on that note, thanks to everybody for taking the time to listen to this extended podcast where we had Biju Chudasama, CTO with Wilson James, and Bob Hecht, advisor to the company, and many others, and a big thinker and transformist. Some of the key takeaways for me is, I think you've heard me speak about this before, is user experience and having the tech stack to support it, but also the philosophy around that, that it permeates through the company. The words like collaboration came up, and Bob's 3 Ps of persistence, perspective, and I'm sorry, patience, perspective. Patience, persistence, and perspective. I'll get it right eventually. And then equally thinking through the consumer view, thinking through it from the user view, being a get stuff done leader, and being humble enough to look over the fence, and more importantly, give back to the community. So I hope you enjoyed the last 45 minutes or so. And please take notes. Think again about what it means to be a CTO, a leader in the community, as well as a leader in your own company. So on that note, a big thanks to Hunter Gatherer, No Vacancy, and the teams that support this channel. So thanks again for your time, and we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.